Hello, this is Greg Allison with Galactic Greg. It's coming to you on 25 July 22. Time on deck is 1200 hours Central Daylight Time. My friends, is SpaceX about to start launching Starship Troopers? Well, as weird as that sounds, the Pentagon actually wants to send rocket launch soldiers anywhere on Earth in hours. Yeah. And the DOD and SpaceX are actually planning to team up to send enormous payloads of troops and gear anywhere on Earth in an hour. I'll explain in a moment why that won't quite work, at least not in an hour. We'll kick around some, albeit faster, but equally zany concepts too, and maybe a few more practical ones before that. But the last one is a real center of might be of quite a bit of interest from an engineering perspective. But first, let's talk about it. Let's see what it is that the DOD actually wants. In fact, you may not know this. I'm sure you've heard about this cargo trooper thing already. But in fact, this has already begun. As of January 22 this year, SpaceX was awarded $102 million. Yeah, for a 5-year contract to develop these concepts under the Rocket Cargo program. And I'll talk more on this later too. Anyway, well, let's just kind of kick this troop aspect around. What's the background? Well, the U.S. Army's 82nd Airborne Division, which is at Fort Bragg, North Carolina, and that's where I was stationed before I went to Fort Greely, Alaska. They have an immediate response force there. And that force is meant to deploy anywhere, anytime around the world in under a day. And yeah, they've seen a fair bit of action lately too, from Iraq to the evacuation of Kabul, and recently to Eastern Europe on the eve of the Russian special operation in Ukraine. You know what I mean? So, but can there be a faster reactionary force, one launched on rockets to secure a military objective like maybe an embassy in just an hour or so? Well, that's one of the ideas of the United States Transportation Command, and they're studying that. It's part of a far-fetched ongoing Department of Defense partnership with SpaceX, the private space company so many of you know and love so dearly. Pardon me, I've got COVID, so if I don't sound right, that's why. A DOD 2001 midterm report on space transportation capabilities for the joint forces identifies 3 case studies for point-to-point space transportation. And one of those was dubbed embassy support. It envisions soldiers strapped on rockets to provide a rapid theater direct delivery capability for the U.S. to an African bear base. And it would provide extremely important, so they say it would prove extremely important in supporting the Department of State's mission in Africa. So, and one of the stated goals for this was to have the ability to demonstrate point-to-point space transportation that could deter non-state actors from aggressive acts toward the United States. Terrorists, anti-terrorism rockets. 2 other case studies for the use of rockets included an alternative method for logistics delivery, like that $102 million 5-year study contract I just mentioned, to the Pacific, and employment of deployable airbase system, including shelters, vehicles, construction equipment, and other gear that can be pre-positioned around the globe and moved to any place that the U.S. Air Force needs to stand up air operations. And one person, Caitlin Johnson, Deputy Director of the Center for Strategic and International Studies Aerospace Security Project, wisely observed, "My 2 cents are that it's unlikely that it would be able to evacuate anybody via a rocket, or quickly via a rocket. If it's in a city, it's not like they can land a Starship next to an embassy." Yeah, it's even more complicated than that. We're going to get into that in a little bit here. Anyway, so Think about now, here's what the Air Force is saying. You know, this is where they're coming from. That's probably what inspired the rocket cargo program. Think about moving 80 short terms, equivalent of a C-17, anywhere on the globe in less than an hour. This is Army General Stephen Lyons, the head of the Transportation Command. He said this in 2020. No, you're not going to do it in less than an hour, General Stevens. I'm sorry, General Stephen Lyons. Not going to happen. I'm going to explain that a little bit. Nope, that's not going to happen. At least not with SpaceX as we know it today, or the Starship as we know it today. You might get it rapid, but it's not going to be an hour. I'm going to talk about that in a minute. But anyway, like I said above, January 22, SpaceX was awarded $102 million for a 5-year contract to develop these concepts under the Rocket Cargo program. And the Rocket Cargo program is the United States Space Force program run through the Air Force Research Laboratory for suborbital spaceflight rocket delivered cargoes involving point-to-point travel anywhere on the Earth. And the program was developed to have the capability to rapidly send cargo anywhere in the world on a rocket, of course, you know, just like we just said. It would involve reusable rockets. So you're going to put them out at just any point in the field? Probably not. That can perform propulsive landing on a variety of landing sites to deliver a C-17's worth of cargo in an hour. No. Again, no. The program was discussed in 2020, announced in 2021 with a budget allocation request, which came through fiscal year 22 and they actually got $102 million for this study. Okay, Greg, why do you keep saying no? That ain't going to happen. Well, I'm not saying that it doesn't make sense to have a rocket cargo program or even a rocket crew delivery program, maybe troop delivery under certain circumstances. But this idea that you're going to get it in an hour is, that's what's not happening. It might be faster than a day for the 82nd Airborne, but you know, you don't just hop. Yeah, sure. A SpaceX fully fueled, from the time you launch it, you can expect to land anywhere on Earth in less than an hour. Granted, there's no problem with that. You gotta fuel it up. You gotta tank the tanks, and that don't happen instantly. Yeah, for SLS Artemis core stage, much smaller than the tankage on Starship. You know, it might take 4 hours to tank those tanks up. 4 hours. Think about that. That's a lot of time. Consider this. The propellant on the Super Heavy is 7.5 million pounds. On the Starship itself, there's 2,650,000 pounds of liquid propellant that has to be tanked. And it don't tank, you just don't just pour it in, because you have to vent some as you tank. So the chilled propellant make more room when you get more in. You just don't just pour it straight in. It takes time to get those tanks topped off. It's going to take hours and hours and hours. Oh yeah, okay, you can still do it in less than a day maybe. Oh, but great, we'll just keep one fuel ready to go. Well, problem is especially the locks, the cryogenic locks, boils off. You have to keep topping it off. That's going to be expensive after a while, and it's not exactly safe to have all that kind of liquid fuel sitting around in a rocket on a stand for a long time. So, you know, look, we're talking over 10 million pounds of propellant between Starship and the Super Heavy. Guys, that's over twice the amount of fuel of a Saturn V or a Russian N-1 rocket. That's a huge amount of fuel. So far, we've never dealt with those amounts of fuel in anything. So that's what I'm saying. It's not going to happen in an hour. No, it's not. Now, toward the end of this presentation, I will show you a booster concept that, yeah, you can launch it immediately. Just hit the torch and boom, it's off. And it'll have capability commensurate to Starship in total performance. Maybe not cost performance, but total performance. So depends on what you want, what you really are willing to pay for, and what your trade-offs are. Other considerations are, guys, think about this. If you're launching this Starship, uh, it's got to have logistics. I mean, if you just launch it out in a combat zone, you're probably not bringing it back. You might be able to put troops in a combat zone. You might be able to land them and have them jump out the little thing, or rappel down from that access at the top. But you know, guys, if you don't have the resources there to refurb and refuel it, unless you land it with surplus fuel, which you might be able to do since you're really going suborbital, not orbital, you might be able to take off again and get to another nearby friendlier base. Maybe if you had to land in China, God forbid, you might be able to take off and maybe you can make it to Guam. Maybe. I don't know. That would be worth looking at. Or maybe better yet, you could stage these things in places that are even closer than just anywhere in the United States, like Fort Bragg, and have some of them at Guam and not have to do the full stack, just do the Starship alone. And maybe it can make it to certain points of interest around the sphere of the East China Sea, the South China Sea, the Yellow Sea. Excuse me, I do have COVID. So there's other possibilities. There are other possibilities for staging and making these things work. One of the things that I'm kind of fond of is this idea of a cargo arsenal ship, using this for the arsenal ship approach, or as a piece of that program. I'll explain that in a second. And then I'm going to go to y'all to my really zany how to launch these payloads instantly. We're going to go there in a minute too. Now, see, that's what you want to do, but I definitely got the concept for it. So we're going to talk that in a second. So hold on to your tinfoil cap while we go through these zany ideas. All right, so I'm going to do a little share here real quick. Article share or two. Let's see. And here it is in Wikipedia, just to show, yes, there is a rocket cargo program. It is through the Space Force, okay? But yeah, and we're not looking at doing very well against China vis-a-vis Taiwan. Because there's an idea that can make all the difference in the world. It's called the arsenal ships, which would use cargo planes, or hey, this could be a starship. Let me stop that share now. I don't really want to show that article. That's not the intention. But this whole arsenal ship concept is often known as the Rapid Dragon arsenal ship, or Rapid Dragon weapons. And the U.S. Air Force is considering B-52s, C-130s, C-17 cargo planes to deploy weapons, but not to put these cargo planes in direct line of fire. They don't want to put these cargo planes too close to the enemy bases. So what they would use is a pelletized standoff weapon like the AGM-158 JASSM Joint Air to Surface Standoff Missile, which has a range of 1,000 miles. So let me explain this. These cargo ships, and maybe some spaceship variant could do this too, is to drop off, get close to the combat zone, and drop these pallets. You can just drop pallet after pallet after pallet. These pallets have all these other munitions in them, maybe several of them. The pallet opens up, and these cruise missiles just start flying out. So that's the thinking there, and they would have another range of maybe 1,000 miles. So you don't have to get within the aerial defense, aerial denial of all the rocket forces of China. So this is a way to defeat their system. And so with this, any cargo aircraft or spacecraft, for that matter, could safely stay out of the fire zone safely and deliver these weapons into the battle space and saturate. With these kind of weapons, you could saturate the enemy airspace with a large volume of low observable cruise missiles. And this could take out whole fleets of enemy ships or lay mines, across vast expanses of the ocean. Well, think about that. This is a huge revolutionary idea, and Starship might be able to play for that. Of course, then again, if you're coming into a real combat zone with troops and a Starship, it might be better if the troops were to parachute out before a landing. There's a big Starship sitting on the ground. Now, this guy's going to stand out like a diamond in a goat's hide, especially if it's silver. If they haven't camo painted it, if it comes with stainless steel, it's going to stick up above the trees. The tree's going to be right about here, and it's going to be a huge target. Not to mention, it's probably not going to be quiet, and the radar profile probably won't be low coming in. So hiding this guy is going to be tough. Now, if you've got a crew access somewhere up here, the crew have got to ride an elevator to get down or rappel to get down, that's going to be tough. But if it's when it's flying in that belly maneuver, belly flop, whatever you want to call it, if instead of having an access port on the, if you got heat shields on one side, you don't have the access port there. It's been nominally planned to be right the opposite. But for this kind of operation, you probably want to have them on the sides. This way, guys could jump out. Hopefully, they avoid hitting the fins. Just have a pole sticking out, and they hook to the pole, and out they go. It's kind of the idea they had for being a parachute outside the space shuttle. Was have a pole that would go out. So something like that might enable troops to parachute as this thing flies around kind of low, and then maybe it tries to land, or it ditches itself into a target. But so that means you're not going to, if you're putting this thing into a combat position, it's not going to be as cheap, because you might recover the super heavy booster, but you're probably going to lose this bird unless you were trying to stage troops to close by the combat zone, like maybe from Fort Bragg to Guam, and you got all the facilities you need at Guam or Japan, and maybe the Philippines comes back into play and we build good bases there again. Stuff like that, or Australia. You might be able to do that, but then that's not putting them right in the combat zone, and you still got to restage them. So how is that any better than what the 82nd Airborne already does? For all that expense? No, I don't really think so. Don't really think so. So I think they're probably willing to eat the cost of losing Starship. So maybe it's not a full up Starship, maybe a cut down, skinny down version, or the older ones that are about to be retired. I don't know. Elon talks about they'll be good forever. But they are limited life items, a lot of things. So some of them might have a use by date on them, or X number of missions, and you might want to consider retiring it. That's true. We'll have a lot of museum pieces, right? Or we could build space stations or other things. I like that idea. So I'm a fan of the Starship. Don't get me wrong. But we're about to go over a whole nother idea here that give you that rapid deployment, at least for cargo. I don't know if you want to put troops on it, but for cargo, this other idea could indeed work. And so hang on a second, I'm going to go back here and do another share screen. Here we are. Oh, no, not SLS. No, not SLS, but a piece of it. A piece of it. These 5-segment solid rocket motors. Each one of them weighs 1.6 million pounds. It produced 3.6 million pounds of thrust. I'm gonna tell you what, when you hit that igniter in here, this puppy is going to go. The important thing is you set them all off simultaneously at exactly the same time, or you're going to have a catastrophe. But so far, that's always been done, at least in the shuttle program. Now, these new boosters are bigger than what's used on the shuttle. The shuttle used a 4-segment booster. So just to show you right here, and this is a NASA site, so I don't feel it's not a problem sharing NASA site. You just got to give it credit. So we're giving it credit to NASA, and there's the logo. But in any event, so each booster generates a maximum of 3.6 million pounds of thrust, burns 6 tons of propellant every second. So my idea is this: you don't use SLS, you have a first stage comprised of five solid rocket boosters, five segment solid rocket boosters. You have a second stage comprised of three of them. All right, we'll stop this here. You're going, Greg, that's crazy. Well, okay, five of those boosters gives you 18 million pounds of thrust. That is greater than the Super Heavy. Just a little bit. That's more thrust than the Super Heavy. Okay. Excuse me. So, and if you're looking at the weight, so what you're talking about, we're talking about having 8 of these boosters, 5 on the first stage, 3 on the second stage, that weigh 1.6 million pounds apiece. And so that works out to what is that? Yeah, that works out to 12.8 million pounds of weight. But you got 18 million pounds of thrust, so you got plenty of thrust. In fact, you got 5.2 million pounds of excess thrust, a large part of which could be payload. Now, a Starship itself, fully fueled, would weigh 2,820,000 pounds. That's the upper stage of the Starship. So that happens to be pretty good. Now, the second stage would give you with the weight of the boosters would be 1.6 times 3 or 4.8 million pounds against 8 million pounds of thrust. So there you got a little less margin on your payload, but what you've got, something on the order still of 5 million pounds. So if you did a fraction of the Starship to the payload capacity of a system like this, the Starship would only be 56%. Fully loaded fueled Starship would only be 56%, 56.4 actually percent of the capacity of the booster I'm talking about. So as payload, you've still got a high thrust to weight ratio. It far exceeds what you need to launch a Starship. In fact, you might decide to launch some other payload fairing that's more optimized to be an arsenal ship or something like that. That's just going to throw these things out there. But if you need to land crew, then Starship would be the optimal payload. You would still have to fuel the Starship though. So you still going to have some delay, but then you wouldn't have to fuel the whole Super Heavy. So that might cut down time if you want to have a crew return. Well, on the other hand, if you're just flying cargo, you don't need that. Now, I admit, riding a booster that's got a first stage of 5 solid rocket boosters, five segment solid rocket boosters, might be a bit rough because those things, they do vibrate hard. Even the 3 on the second stage might be tough too. But quite frankly, this gives you the combined propulsive ability of this. You're talking over 4 minutes of burn time for anything going point to point on Earth. That's plenty. In fact, it'd probably throw the Starship into orbit if the Starship's burning, its own fuel as the third stage. So what would be its payload capacity? We have to work these things out. But guys, this is a way to have a more rapid launch system. But I think it would probably work better for just pure cargo delivery. And you might even have some other propellant for landing that doesn't require cryogenics, so that you can have some of it preloaded, maybe solid or something. It might come down hard, but if you're just landing cargo or you can parachute the stuff out, flying in the belly flop, flight mode, then that might work. So I like the arsenal ship concept, for a way to deliver weapons real fast anywhere in the world, and lots of them. So this might be the arsenal ship, a SpaceX arsenal ship, or one of these SRB arsenal ships might work out quite well. Yeah, you got to throw away all those boosters, and you got to pay for those. So that's extra cost. But you could get launch on demand. You know, launch on demand, practically speaking, a lot faster than fueling up the boosters for SpaceX. Now, I'm not saying that it's, you know, if you have a portion of the passenger idea point to point on Earth is regular travel, so you're doing this stuff on schedule and you're ahead of time fueling. But military operations don't necessarily follow schedule like that. Military operation is when needed, where needed. So very different kind of animal. You know, somehow you can fit it into a pipeline of things that are already going, that might work out too. If there is a robust point-to-point surface on Earth transportation, you might have the military just go in and commandeer a regular starship. But then again, coming down in a combat situation, she's going to stick out. She's going to stick out real bad and be a major target. So I would want to disgorge the troops ahead of time, and I just don't think that a regular commercial operation is going to have the hatches on the side and be optimized for people to jump out of in the sky. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe they'll figure that out. Or maybe the military will have enough point-to-point transportation needs themselves that they'll be able to fit it in somehow, make it work. That's possible down the road. That's very speculative. Of course, there's going to be a lot of legalese to be, so the logistics are going to be horrendous. The legalese to be worked out about this is going to be somewhat interesting, but it could be done. It's just you're not going to take a Starship at any point in time and fly crew somewhere else to the Earth in an hour, okay? Not without some big logistics already ongoing. Hey, you're already flying them or something like that kind of arrangement. I just don't see the Starship as we know it. Of course, that is as we know it. Maybe you ought to come up with a solid fuel version. No, or a hybrid rocket version. Ah, hey, I know a little bit about hybrid rockets. That might be a better way to it, since he's not having to burn methane for this operation, maybe. This is one of my hybrid rocket motors that I burned back in the year 2000. So, yeah, been there, done that. Even got the Space Pioneer Award to prove it. So, I was an entrepreneur from 1997, guys. I'm a space entrepreneur way back. I was New Space before New Space was a word. See? Entrepreneur. So I've done rockets, like a lot of our other YouTube buddies on here who like to talk rockets. I've done lots of rockets, space station, all kind of stuff. I'll bring you real world experience. May not have the oodles of hours to develop a video and all the bells and whistles, and I'm not going to sit here and go down to the nut by nut everything you're adding to a Starship. That may be fun. I love Felix for doing that. I really do. But you know, that stuff changes so much. Nah, why bother? The real flight configurations will differ quite a bit. Anyway, but Felix is a lot of fun. I love it. Anyway, thank you guys for watching. And please subscribe to my channel, bang the notification bell, and click on. With that, I'm going to say, Greg out.